Oh yeah, got started with some fun. Hey folks, it's the guy with the bow tie checking in with you live for another edition of Business with Benefits. To my right, we have Alicia Butler Pierre. How you doing, Alicia?
I am doing well, Daryl. How are you?
Good. I love that song. I know I got some legal issues with that song, but that's a good way to start off an interview. So, want to catch up with the audience real quick for some comments we had come in. We had Catherine. Hey, Catherine. She's out in Palm Beach, the Florida hot zone. It's hot here in Georgia, and you're in Louisiana right now. You said, right?
Yes, it's hot and humid.
Oh Lord. Well,
Where
yeah,
I
I'm
am.
I'm inside, so I don't know how humid it is today. But and we had Marianne. She's in Switzerland. Hey, Marianne, all the way
Yes,
from Switzerland. Thanks for jumping
that's my
in.
friend.
Cool.
Yes.
Oh, Catherine said she's with you. It's 100 degrees, so it's 100 degrees out there right now. Lord. Well, I want to first of all say thank you to hashtag Team Live, hashtag Team Replay, however you consume the content. We appreciate it. And today we're going to talk about something that most business owners hate: operations and infrastructure. We want to, you know that with what you do, people just want to do it. I just want to sell what I sell, make what I make, and walk away. I don't want to do any other stuff. So this is very perfect timing because everything's changed for business. I'm a working from home since March, which I worked probably 20% from home before. Now it's 100%. So my operations has changed. But for the people that don't know who you are and what you do, let them know what your specialty is.
Sure. Well, first, thank you so much for having me on your show, Daryl. I really appreciate it. So, again, I'm Alicia Butler Pierre, and I specialize in business infrastructure. And what that means is I basically help fast growing, smaller companies scale to the next level. And I do that through, again, business infrastructure. And that just basically means that I'm taking a very detailed, comprehensive look at the people, the processes, and the tools and technologies that make up that company and help them figure out how they can do what they do better. So, yes, it's all about operations.
I love it. I'm sure you're a fan of the that show, The Prophet, by Marcus Lamone. Have you seen that show before?
I've heard of it, I've never seen it.
You like it because it's all about people, process, and product. So you like that, I'm sure. All right, so let's break that down. So, what got you into being a person that focuses on operations? Like, was that your natural inclination, or did you see a hole in the market?
Well, my background is actually in engineering, chemical engineering to be exact. So when I was working in different chemical plants and oil refineries. And chemical engineers, when you're working in that type of an environment, you're usually known as what they call a process engineer. So
Mm-hmm.
what would happen, I'm sure, have you heard of Roundup,
Yes.
the weed killer, the herbicide? So I used to make Roundup. Don't judge me, but that's what I used.
Like I was already thinking, my wife said we can't use Roundup anymore. Don't use that stuff anymore.
It is dangerous. So that's why I said don't judge me. But what I was responsible for doing, Daryl, is whenever a particular batch of, let's say, an intermediate form of Roundup was produced, as the process engineer, if we found that that particular batch didn't meet the specifications for whatever reason, my
Mm-hmm.
job was to go and figure out what went wrong in the process of making that particular batch to cause it to be off spec. So I
Okay.
knew it didn't take me very long to figure out that I did not want to do that for the rest of my life. I didn't want to be, I did not want to be in an oil refinery or chemical plant for the rest of my career. And so I decided to go back to business school. And
Okay.
another reason why I made that decision, Daryl, was because I realized there would be times when I would go into a room with accountants, for example, and it was like they were speaking a different language.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know a lot about assets and liabilities and equity and all of these different accounting and financial related terms that they were using that were actually driving business decisions that impacted the way that I worked on a day-to-day basis. So that was another driving factor for me to go back to school. So I started I started pursuing my MBA, going to school at night while I worked full time during the day. And by
Mm-hmm.
the time I completed my MBA studies, I gave them the deuces. And
Jesus.
I decided, so I'm from Louisiana originally. So I was living and working in the New Orleans area. And I just had this intuitive gut feeling that I needed to get out of New Orleans and get out quick, fast, and in a hurry. And I literally put my house up for sale. I quit my job very abruptly, and I relocated to a city, Atlanta, Georgia, where I literally knew one person.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw Atlanta as having this strong corporate presence. You know, so many companies are headquartered there. And I saw that as a good place for me to pursue this new career using my MBA. And that didn't happen, 𝘺𝙪𝙯.
Hey, look, I understand. Look, my wife and I moved from Vegas to Georgia, and we only knew her family and a grandmother. So I have a degree in accounting. When you mentioned having a degree and then I work, my degree is in accounting. I'm an insurance though. Yeah.
Interesting. Isn't that something? So really quickly, I know this is a roundabout way of answering your question, but the way I fell into the work that I'm doing right now, when I first moved to Atlanta, I was looking for career opportunities where I could leverage my MBA as well as my engineering background. And I applied for so many different jobs. And after about 60 days of doing that, I decided, you know what, for the amount of time, effort, and energy that it's taking me to look for a job working for someone else, I could redirect that time, that same time, effort, and energy, and create my own opportunity working for myself. And that's how my company 𝘂𝙪𝙧𝙧𝙪 was born. Through a period of self-reflection, I realized I've always been naturally very good at organizing things. Mm-hmm. I was always good at whatever job I had, not because I was the smartest person in the room, but because I was very organized and I had processes and systems. And so when I started my company, it really started as a professional organizing company. But here's the thing, 𝘺𝙪𝙯, I found that most of my clients were operating home-based businesses. They were those solopreneurs that we're going to talk about later on in your show, operating these home-based businesses. So it wasn't that they were chronically disorganized people by nature, and they certainly weren't hoarders. They just needed better systems and processes. And that's how I was able to start capitalizing, again, on that engineering, process engineering work, as well as some of the business acumen that I picked up along the way as a result of my MBA. And eventually the language and the way I did things morphed from professional organizing into business infrastructure. I know
no, that's good. That's very similar. It's good. It's funny that you hear that background of make my own opportunity because, you know, everybody's looking for jobs right now. And a lot of folks do have skills that can transfer to their own business. It's just that leap of faith is kind of hard. But a couple of comments to catch up with. Your friend Marianne said, I love it.
Yes.
Catherine has a funny comment. Let's reopen the schools with the growing rate of the virus. So she's in Florida dealing with the issue out there. Oh, and I got to slip in there. Go Tigers. I can't have the LSU graduate on here and I say go Tigers.
Careful, that might get us both in trouble, depending on who's listening.
And we have Catherine said operations rate more than sales. We hold up the company. I think she means I think that's rates higher than sales. They're both important.
I know what Catherine means. So I say they're equally important because you can do like the mistake that I made where I built this beautiful, shiny thing, right? I had all the operations, all of the processes in place, but I didn't have any customers. And so then you have people who are natural salespeople, and they're very good at marketing and branding and promotions, publicity. But then when they bring in all of that business, they don't have the operations in place in order to fulfill those sales, those orders, or they can't service the accounts the way that they need to be serviced. So you have to strike a balance between both. And that's actually something that I talk a lot about in my book.
Yeah, that's where I found myself initially struggling, and it's still a battle because I mean I'm not that person naturally. Naturally, I'm the go get it, go get the opportunity, make the opportunity, and that thrill of the kill is big for me. Like, oh, I did it, I got the deal. But for my first year and a half or so of insurance, I didn't do like barely any operations. Operations for me was they came to me, like, hey, I got to get this bill paid. Hey, I got to do this, and I'm like, oh yeah, I should probably tell you how to do that. I should probably tell you how to do this. And it wasn't naturally occurring to me. But 7 years late, 5 years after that, and I'm like, oh, I got to keep these people accustomed to what they're supposed to get. So what do you think is the harder thing, taking the person that is the natural salesperson and giving them operations, or taking the operations person and making them into salesperson?
So I would say neither, because
Okay.
you are good at what you are good at. So I'm not an advocate of, how we talk about that SWOT analysis, your strengths, your weaknesses, opportunities,
Yep.
and threats. So we all have our weaknesses. We all have things that we either don't like to do, or we're just not very good at it. Why take the time to train yourself doing something that you just by instinct and by nature you don't enjoy it? Why not just outsource that or hire someone else on your team who can do that, someone to complement you? You could spend a lifetime trying to educate yourself about all of the different components that are necessary to keep your business functioning on a day-to-day basis. So I'm not an advocate at all of trying to convert yourself from being one way into another. You are who you are. You like what you like, and you're naturally good at what you're naturally good at. And there are find the people who have those complementary skill sets instead of trying to force yourself to be or like something that you don't want to be or you don't enjoy.
So this is a perfect segue then. This is a good segue into the solopreneur term. So when you hear the word solopreneur, what does that mean to you?
So when most people hear, at least this is my opinion, I think when most of us hear the word solopreneur, if we actually break down, if we look at the etymology of the word, right? So solo meaning you are by yourself. But we all know that anyone who starts out in business is just not wise. You won't get very far if you literally try to do every single thing yourself. And I find that for most of us, for many people that I've worked with who still describe themselves as solopreneurs, when I start actually asking them questions, they do have other people that they're working with. They just don't think of those people as a quote unquote team. So for example, most of us have a web designer, someone who's actually designed our website. Many of us may work with social media managers to help us with our content. We have people, we may have a bookkeeper. We were talking about accountants earlier. You may have a bookkeeper or a CPA that you work with. Many of us have attorneys, different types of attorneys and lawyers that we work with. Those people, even though they aren't necessarily employees, those people are still very much a part of your team.
True. So basically it's the mindset of that no business stands alone. They have other people that help them. They're just not a W-2 or 1099. Right. So why do you think it is then? Do you think there's like a negative connotation to the phrase solopreneur then? Like, does it have a negative side to it?
I think it's a misrepresentation of, I don't know if when people use that word, if it almost seems synonymous with freelancer or independent contractor. Again, that you're just kind of, maybe that's what it is for me, Daryl, that when I hear the word solopreneur, I'm thinking, oh, I'm just a freelancer. I'm a freelancer photographer, or almost like you're an Uber driver or something like that. If you actually have a business that is registered wherever you are operating, it is a business. You're not a 1099. You're not an independent contractor. But I think, again, at least for me, those terms almost mean the same thing when I hear them. And that's why I think solopreneur is or can be problematic.
Okay. And real quick, Catherine asks, how are we going to get in the weeds now?
Well, here's the thing. There's a sole proprietor, which is an accurate representation of the way some businesses are set up, right?
Right.
Meaning you might have 100% ownership of your business, but it's not the same as being a solopreneur.
Because you have other people to help and run things behind the scenes for you.
Correct.
Real quick, Marlon said he's team live. Thanks, Marlon, for jumping in. And,
hi, Marlon.
Catherine said the same background as you. My daughter left chemical engineering and received her MBA at the Sternby
Yeah, and
School.
a lot of people leave chemical engineering, and it's also really interesting to see the career path that those of us who started off as engineers are now into. A lot of people might be surprised to hear this, but some of the best financial advisors, best financial planners, a lot of the people that are on Wall Street, believe it or not, they have degrees in engineering.
You know what's funny about that? My original degree was mathematics and computer engineering. And then I did the mathematics. When the computer engineering came up, I said, I don't want to go to robots all day and microchips and stuff. So I took one semester of computer engineering and said, forget this. And but it's funny you said that. I didn't finish it, but I can see that happening. Marlon said, fully agree, Alicia. One of my Clifton strengths is being a maximizer. Promote and capitalize on your strengths and work with compatible folks.
Yes, Marlon. I agree fully 100%. Yes,
Marianne, do what you do best.
That's right.
And Carlotta, thanks for jumping in. Carlotta, she said good info here. So let's break down. You had you have a Rubik's Cube. I want to see how this works into the conversation because I'm curious. As soon as you said props, I'm a squirrel. So like, ooh, props. Let's do it. Let's do it. So what does the Rubik's Cube have to do with operations right now?
So this is just a prop that I like to use sometimes when I'm trying to explain what I mean when I say business infrastructure, because one of the pushbacks that I hear a lot of times when I'm working with, especially small businesses, I don't have processes. Yes, you do. And when it comes to the people component of business infrastructure, they may still say, again, having that solopreneur mindset, well, I don't work with anyone else. It's just me. And that's not the case. What I usually find is when I go in and I start working with these different small businesses, and here's where this Rubik's Cube kind of comes into play. Imagine that each of these colors represents different processes and procedures that you may have in place, different tools and technologies. And when I say tools, I mean things like equipment, your phone, a camera, your laptop, a printer, different types of furniture. So tools encompasses all of that, including different software technologies that you may be leveraging. And then there's the people aspect. So you have all of these components already there. They're here in this structure. We just have to make sure that we get everything to where all of the yellows are together, all of the orange, red, green, blue, so forth and so on. That's my job. So you already have a lot of these elements of what I call business infrastructure in place. We just need to put a little bit more structure to it and make sure that all of the greens are together, all of the reds are together, that everything is truly linked. Because as we all know, the minute, if we had a perfect Rubik's Cube here, right? The minute you start making any type of twist or turn or manipulation, you've broken the link, so to speak. And so our job is to just show that codependency that every aspect of the business has on each other. A lot of times we do things in isolation, not taking into account the effect or the impact that it can have on other parts of the business. And that's not something limited to smaller companies. This happens all the time in big companies. How many people do you know? I'm sure you know of several friends and colleagues, Daryl, that work in these large corporate environments, and they're so siloed. And if you were to ask them, well, what does this company really look like on the inside? They probably couldn't even tell you.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate.
I'm sorry?
I was saying that's unfortunate. Go ahead.
Yeah, and if they were to ask their boss likely would not be able to answer that question either. So this isn't something this isn't a problem that is limited to smaller companies only. It happens across the board, regardless of industry, regardless of size.
And that's why I love you made a show around this. So you have a podcast called Business Infrastructure. So break down the premise, the deeper dive in business infrastructure, because I think a lot of small businesses haven't heard that phrase. So you mentioned people say, I don't have procedures, but business infrastructure for the lay, what does that actually mean for them to understand why they need it and what it is?
So the way I define it is business infrastructure is a system for how you link your people, your processes, and your tools so that you can scale in a sustainable, profitable, and a repeatable manner. Again, a lot of times when we're talking about operations, operational excellence, business infrastructure, these terms and these topics and all of the stuff that goes with it usually falls on deaf ears for companies that are in their startup phase, because when you're first starting out your company, it's all about the marketing. It's all about promotions. You're trying to drive customers or clients into your funnel. But what happens when you're at a point in your business, Daryl, where you've done such a great job at sales and marketing that you now have a different type of problem? You now have more business than you can keep up with. So your demand is really high, but your ability to supply that demand may still be low.
Yeah.
This is the perfect scenario for a person like myself and also Mariana to come in and start to get some balance there. We want to make sure that we can supply the demand that's coming in for your goods and your services. So that's what I consider business infrastructure to be. And the reason I started the podcast was because it gives me a way to continue to spread the gospel, if you will, of business infrastructure, but perhaps more importantly and more, the thing I think that adds even more value to the audience is the fact that I can have people like Mariana, who's on the live now. They can come onto the podcast as a guest and affirm the things that I say about the importance of having processes and workflows and systems and procedures and operations and business infrastructure. So in other words, very similar to what you're doing with your live, it's not just you talking about business with benefits. You have other guests come on and basically affirm and kind of second the notion that, yes, Daryl, the things that you talk about and the different topics that you espouse, I agree with it. And not only do I agree with it, I can share examples of how I've applied it either within my own company or for my clients.
Well, we're not even on your show and you're talking to me with the operation stuff, because I know you said to espouse your meanings and goods, but yeah, this was you and I talking about the podcast. Mine, I do 3 shows a week, and I don't have great operations for after. Like, anybody's been watching this for a while, I do have a audio version of this, so this is probably episode 92 or something. This shows the operations side. I don't even know what number it is right now. I just go and converting it to audio. You and I were talking about that. I'm like, I'm very backlogged on that because I'm trying to do it on myself. So let's break down this notion of you create the product, you create the whatever it is, and then it's this point where the tipping point where this isn't a revenue thing for me, but it would still be good to have more of this out there in audio version. So where is the typical point you come into play? Is it as soon as they start the business, or is it usually when, like, hey, I can't handle this anymore, life preserver, help me?
It would be great to come in at the beginning of a business, but again, it's a message and an idea that just falls on deaf ears. Because again, when you're first starting out, you're trying to attract most funding, most of your monies are being spent toward that sales and that marketing. You're trying to bring customers into your sales funnel. Or you're trying to bring people into your store, or you're trying to sell widgets. Whatever it is that you're offering, you have to get the word out about that. So me coming in and talking to you about, yeah, Daryl, let's make sure you have all of your processes and procedures documented. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to spend the money on it. But I will say this, for companies such as software or tech companies that are startups, they're heavily funded. And oftentimes when they have these angel investors or outside, they've received some venture capital of some sort, they are expected to scale very quickly. So they do have the money, and they know that they have to do it. So I would say that would be an exception. Startups that are well funded and that are expected to scale very rapidly. However, the majority of the time, I am able to come into a company. Years ago, Daryl, I attended a workshop, and the facilitator asked every single person in the room. It was a room full of entrepreneurs. Do you
Okay.
sell aspirin or do you sell vitamins? And he said, you sell vitamins if people come to you unprovoked, basically. So if you have, let's
Right.
say, a health and beauty, or you're in the health and beauty and wellness industry, for example, people may not necessarily need your services, but they go to it because it's going to make them feel better, or maybe it's a proactive type of measure. You
Right.
sell aspirin when there's a pain point. So people come to you because they're in pain of some sort. So I
Mm-hmm.
sell aspirin. Unfortunately, the majority of my clients don't come to me until they're already at that fast growth point where they
Yeah.
have more business than they can handle. That's when they realize we need to hire more people. But before we hire those people, we need to make sure that they will know how to do their work. So that's where the
Right.
processes and the procedures and the systems come into play. And then they also recognize, as we continue to grow exponentially, grow like wildfire, we also might need to upgrade or even replace some of our different tools and technologies.
Yeah.
So when I come in and start talking to them about business infrastructure, when they're at that point in their business, I have a very receptive audience at that point.
Well, yeah, when you got a headache, you're like, give me all the aspirin you got. Because you and I are different in that regard, because I'm selling vitamins if you break it down that way, because, people aren't thinking about insurance unless they're being proactive for the most part. And when they come to me with the aspirin mindset, I'm stressed out. Like, I need new
Yes.
health insurance in 2 days. Like, no, it's supposed to be
Well,
like I need a month.
yeah, that's why I have a hat on right now to cover, I don't want you to see my gray. So it is very stressful. This is my COVID hairdo that you see
Oh
right
my
now.
gosh. And Miss Micheline, she said, wonderful information. Sorry, Queen, if I butchered your name. Thanks for
you.
jumping in here. Carlotta had a good comment. Business infrastructure creates duplication. Is that right? I know for a fact that duplicatable systems will lead to insane success. So would you say that creates
Exactly.
duplication?
Yes. So thank you so much for bringing up that point, Carlotta. Has anyone in the chat, or excuse me, anyone on the live, have you ever read the book, The E-Myth?
Oh, I love that book.
So what Michael Gerber, the author of the book, The E-Myth, what he talks about is, even if you are not thinking about eventually franchising your business, you still want to make sure that you get certain key systems and processes in place so that if you decide you want to open additional offices, as you start to hire more people, if you want to sell your company eventually, or if you want to name your successor, someone you will bring in, that you will groom to eventually take over your place as the CEO of your company, you have to have these different things in place. So I always encourage people to read that book, because as Carlotta said, it really makes a very strong, very powerful case for the importance of that duplication.
Mm-hmm.
And so the only thing I don't like about the E-Myth is, and I understand why the book was written this way, is that it doesn't actually tell you how to do those things.
Right,
But
yeah.
that's where my book comes in. So shameless plug.
Plug it away, Queen. Plug it away.
For my book. It's called Behind the Facade: How to Structure Company Operations for Sustainable Success. So it literally gives you a step-by-step guide to actually creating that business infrastructure. So if you read a book like The E-Myth and you're all excited and you're saying, yes, I'm sold. I'm sold on this idea of having duplication in my business and creating a franchisable type model, even if I don't plan to franchise my business, but I have no idea where to start. Get my book, and it'll definitely take you through that, again, through a very detailed step-by-step framework for how you can do that at your company.
And make sure with any book you read it a couple times. I mean, I'm sure your book isn't like a one-time read and you're like, you got it. Anything you do, you got to practice.
It is not a bedtime story at all.
Read it multiple times so you understand that. And then we had some of the comments. Mariana said, thank you, Alicia. So she gave you some kudos there. And Queen Lana Gordon, she said, love this. It's important to have great system, people, process, and
Yes.
systems.
Yes.
So let's look at those three things. Which one is usually the hardest to kind of let's say it is a 5-person business, been around for 10 years. Let's do a case study. People's the hardest one. you instantly that people.
Because here's the thing, people are not robots. When we're talking about systems or technologies, those are things that we have a much larger degree of control over. We can't, human beings do not, we're not robots. We have feelings, we have different types of emotions, and all of that has to be managed. And so a lot of people that I've had come onto my show, they talk extensively about the importance of company culture and how you can, the importance of having your company culture dictates the type of people that you are going to attract as potential employees, even as people that you may outsource work to. That people component is such a tricky thing because there's so many nuances to us as human beings. And my friend Mariana, she actually has, I would love to plug her podcast as well. Her podcast is called the Operational Excellence Podcast, and she specializes specifically in multilingual contact centers. And so she and I have had some really great conversations about that people component.
And I like the fact that you're hitting so hard on that, because I think about my business, different people coming in and out. And it is so important, that culture, because as the culture has changed for my team, the culture of people and the better kind of persons come along. But what's going on with COVID-19, we're going through a lot of change right now. So you and I, when we talked about the show, was about remote work. Operations might have been one way when you had the office, because you might have had Susan here in her corner, you were in your office. It was the silo thing was very easy or visible, at least. Now you're working at home. So let's talk about operation with the home life. How has that changed in your business? Because I know you've worked from home, but as far as other people, how has that changed for your clientele, the kind of people you work with, since we're mostly working from home now for a lot of people?
The clients that I've been working with have really stepped up to the charge of trying to be creative and thinking about how they can either work remotely, or if that's not possible, how can we still operate our business with as much incorporating contactless, and that's a word I've been hearing a lot also lately because of COVID. But how can we do things? So I'll just give you a really quick example with restaurants, for example. Many restaurants are, as we all know, they are struggling right now. But is it possible to have pickup only? Is it possible to rent a food truck and update your website to say, hey, this is where we're going to have food trucks strategically located throughout the metro area or wherever your community is. These are our hours of operation. How can you be creative? And that's what we call business continuity, by the way, disaster recovery and business continuity. Business continuity meaning, how can you make sure that you keep your operations going, even in the midst of some type of a crisis? For example, COVID-19, what we're dealing with right now. So as soon as the lockdown started to occur worldwide, I immediately started sending each of my clients a copy of a disaster recovery and business continuity template to get them to start thinking about, okay, how are we going to pull this off?
And how does that help
your
clients?
Answer your question?
No, that does, because I mean, that's the thing I think that's been the hardest is like restaurants you did see quickly, Uber Eats, contactless, all that kind of picked up. But some restaurants didn't. I can think by my house, there's a Mexican restaurant that still has a line out the door. And I'm like, what are y'all doing? This thing spreads by talking and being around each other. Why are you confining in close quarters? But that restaurant's probably like, we can't make any money unless we have people in here. So let's talk to that space. The people that say they need to still have an office, because I mean, Georgia's a good example, and Louisiana is too. Cases aren't getting better. It's bad in the South. So for someone that knows the people component, the process, and the systems, we're seeing this issue where COVID never left phase 1 for the South. It's still phase 1 right now. So for going through the rest of the year, that guide has probably helped some of your businesses that were kind of like, oh, let's just see what happens, or this isn't a big deal. Has that helped a lot of them kind of wrap their head around, I need the change to thrive throughout the rest of the year?
Absolutely. And here's what's so funny. Just as it's very difficult for me to talk about business infrastructure with most startup companies, it's also difficult for me to talk with my existing clients. These are people I'm already working with. I
Mm-hmm.
almost always bring up business continuity and disaster recovery, and they usually look at me like, what on earth do we need to talk? We don't want to talk about the bad stuff, Alicia. But when we talk about business continuity and disaster recovery, right now we're going through a pandemic worldwide.
Right.
But a disaster could also occur in the form of some type of a natural weather disaster. It could be a tornado, flood, fire, earthquake,
Yeah.
bad snowstorm. Disaster also happens in the form of theft. It could be intellectual property theft. It could be a physical, tangible piece of equipment that someone has stolen. It could be data that has been stolen. Unfortunately, prior to COVID, when I would bring up this subject of disaster recovery and business continuity, even with my most savvy clients, they didn't want to have the conversation. Why talk
Mm-hmm.
about it? And
Welcome
I
to my
think
world
too,
of talking about people dying all the time. This is my world talking
yes,
about death and
yes,
sickness.
and it's unfortunate because you don't realize you need it until you need it,
Yeah.
right? That's definitely,
No.
I'm sure you get that often when it comes to insurance, different types of insurance, especially.
Oh yeah. When I get that phone call, like I need life insurance like in a week, I'm like, who's dying? Who has cancer? You know, and I hate to think that way, but it's just people don't come to me that way. They're very reactionary. So you're
Hmm.
in the same kind of boat as I am with fighting things. And real quick, Mariana put out their disaster recovery template. Love
Yes,
this.
and I have something that I can share with everyone, um,
Go for it.
so that they can have access to that template. But I would have to, it would take me some time to pull up that link. But is there a
We
way to get this information to everyone on the live
Yeah, what we'll
after?
do is we'll put it in the comments afterwards too. We can put it in the comments
Okay,
afterwards.
perfect. Yes,
And
I'm more than happy to give everyone a copy of that.
and she said BCP is often very back of necessary processes,
Yes,
and that's so dangerous. Your firm is so vulnerable without a BCP.
she's absolutely correct.
Break
So
down
even,
BCP for people that don't know what that is.
oh, sorry, business continuity plan. I'm pretty sure that's what Mariana means. So it could be something, there's so many different components to your business that you just don't think about. We just take it for granted. The phone system, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Once everyone goes remotely, how are you going to handle your phone system?
True.
Especially in Mariana's situation, she's working with contact centers. So you have a triage, there's a queue. You know, when a person first dials that toll-free telephone number, where do they go based on the option that they select? And so how is all of that information going to be transferred now, not to people's physical phones that they may have at their desk, but
Yeah.
instead it's going to be transferred more than likely sometimes to their cell phone. So I'll give you a really great example, Daryl. The company that hosts many of my websites is GoDaddy,
Mm-hmm.
GoDaddy.com. 3 of my websites went down back in April. 3
Ooh.
of them. One was down an entire month. And it was very unpleasant getting on the phone talking to technical support. But to be honest with you, they literally were doing the best that they could. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll never forget, one day I was on the phone with one of the technicians, and he was starting to vent to me, and he said, you know, this is what happens when you have close to 10,000 employees who all of a sudden have to start working from home. And
Mm, yeah.
there was no plan to make it happen. So there was a lot of duplication of work effort. There was a ticket that was submitted, and then some people never received, some of the technicians never received the tickets. Some of them could see the ticket information. It was a mess. It was a
Yeah.
mess. And my website, which is my bread and butter, was down for an entire month because of that.
That's crazy just to think about. This is kind of showing out the U.S. This is the same thing, that there's no process or plan with the whole response to the virus.
Exactly.
I know for in Cobb County schools, and shout out Cobb County, but it was kind of like back and forth with, are we going back to school? You can go if you want to. We're going to do half and half. And it was like every other day, or not really, but every week, it would just check your email. Like, what are they going to say this week about school for this school year? And there's no plan. So, I mean, this plays out in multiple areas. I think about, as I talk to my agents, the thing I find myself saying is, if your business is boring, it's profitable. When my business was exciting and kind of running all over the place, and it still has peaks of that here and there, but when it was crazy, I didn't know it was going to happen each day. And I'll kind of wonder, like, am I going to get a check? Am I going to be okay? But when it kind of got more boring, like, I need to make this many phone calls, need to have this many emails, things like that, then it became more repeatable and planned. And real quick, Lana put out there, business continuity plan is so important and should be part of planning moving forward.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that you mentioned the school system. If there's a school out there right now that does not have some type of a disaster recovery business continuity plan in place that includes virtual or remote classroom learning, I don't know what else it would take for them to understand the importance of having something like that in place. They should have started that planning the minute the shutdown occurred, if they didn't have it in place before. And so now here we are, schools are contemplating at this very moment, do we open in a couple of weeks or do we not? And if we do not open in a couple of weeks, do our students have the laptops that they need to be able to access classes remotely? Are our teachers prepared? Are their lessons planned? Do they have digital lesson plans? There's so much that goes into that. To think the idea that some schools are not there yet in terms of their planning and preparation when they've literally had the entire summer to do that is that's really frightening to a person like me.
No, I agree. I mean, this is why I'm putting together a live about, schooling from home and educational things, because my wife and I, we did online public school for our kids, not this past school year, but the one before that. And then we went back to brick and mortar just to give them a social experience. But we saw clearly when the school district had to go virtual, it was a night and day difference, because teachers didn't know how to use Zoom or how to get on Microsoft meetings, or a meeting, I sent the wrong link, and we're like, we can't see the class. Oh, wrong link. It was so haphazard. We're like, these kids are behind. They're doing one Zoom class for the whole day. That's it. One Zoom class and then one elective. And we're like, if this is what the school year is going to be like, we got to bone up on some other stuff, because there's no way they're getting 4 hours or 6 hours of instruction when the school is barely figuring out if they're open at this point in time. So I think this covers all areas. The U.S. is not a planning culture. I know I'm not a big planner, but I've kind of had to learn with business over time. Getting these things planned helps you have less anxiety and kind of helps you grow and scale and duplicate. So I want to make sure we have some parting words for people to know where to find you and how to get more information from you, because you're great at helping get things organized, and it's more than that, but let them know how they can find out more information from you.
Sure. Well, definitely reach out to me here on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. And I try my best to post valuable content that I feel would be very helpful to people in their journey as they start to put in, again, these key processes and business infrastructure. So please reach out to me on LinkedIn. Another great place to go is my website, which is AliciaButlerPierre.com. And that site really serves as a hub for everything else that I have going on. So when you get to that site, you will then be able to see more information about my book. You'll be able to see more information about my podcast, and hopefully you'll become a subscriber. And you can also find more information about my actual consulting firm, which is Equilibria. So go to this site, and from there, you'll be able to see all of the other things that I have going on.
Perfect. And make sure you guys, if you know a business that's struggling with operations, tag them on the comments for this, or share the video so they can talk to Alicia or actually see her live, because there's something different about, there's plenty of websites that talk about operations and marketing and planning and all that, but to see a real person that's down to earth talked about it is very helpful to help you make that decision. But Alicia, I appreciate your time on here. I know are you staying in Louisiana for the whole rest of the summer or just temporarily?
No, honestly, Daryl, I've been here now. I think, and Mariana knows this, I've been here. This is my second week, and
Okay.
I may be here maybe another week or two, but I know that I feel like a second shutdown is inevitable.
Yeah.
So I said, you know what? it's either now or never if I want to see my family and, well, see my parents in
Right.
2020. I better get out here now, because I may not be able to come back before the end of the year.
I agree. There's probably a second shot. I mean, all signs point to yes, that it'll make sense scientifically to do that. Now we just got to see if the planning and the processes will come up and say that.
Yes. And I hope they would reach out to me and some of the other people, operations advocates we have here on the live. We can help. We
No,
can help.
you know America doesn't do that. We're just winging it. We're just gonna figure it out. We're not Japan. We're not China. We're not gonna plan this thing out. We're just gonna go by the seat of our pants and see what happens.
It'll take care of itself, right?
Yeah,
It'll
it'll
work
just
itself
disappear.
out.
It'll work itself
Yeah.
out. But I would hope they contact someone like you because this is where you need expert help. So if your business, the people that watch this and can hear the sound of my voice, if your business does not have a plan for operation for working with COVID, I've seen this with calling businesses for work, my wife calling businesses, my agents working with people, the phone rings to nowhere, or you call them and like, oh, it went to my cell phone instead of his cell phone. Like it's just all over the place. So if you talk to businesses that are going through this, spaghetti soup of how to run their business right now, tell them call Alicia to get some help because they don't want to lose their whole business. But operations can have you lose your whole thing sometimes. Even if your sales are great, the operations can kill your business. But thanks for joining us on Business with Benefits. We'll catch you guys next time. Please be safe. Wash your hands. Physically distance. Wear a mask, please. And we will catch you guys next time.